It as a mono one mic setup. We will already know, because we'll only need one mic, that we're only going to need one audio channel in the mono form. Okay. If we knew we were going to do some sort of other audio kind of setup, maybe we're going to do acoustic guitar, we would then realize, okay, we want stereo audio input. Okay. If we knew we wanted to do MIDI, we would probably do it in stereo, and it would be a stereo MIDI track. So it's important to know what your goal is in the overall big picture and how you want to capture it. So today you're going to have one mic, you'll have one line. So for simplicity, we're just going to go ahead and create one track, and that's how we're going to kick this off. So step one in recording audio is to create a new track. Does anybody remember what the command was, or the shortcut for creating a new track? Yes, Grady.
Command-Shift-N.
Command-Shift-N. So step one is create a new track. Command-Shift-N. Now today I'm going to break these down. In the future as we go, your steps will literally be create a new audio track, and you need to know what that is. For today, I'll itemize it, but this will be the last time that creating a new audio track will be itemized. Okay, so step one, Command-Shift-N. Step two will be to choose to create one mono audio track. So step two is choose, create one mono audio track. Again, we know we need an audio track because only audio tracks, like if you're using a microphone, you need an audio track. If you're using a line input, you need an audio track, right? Or an instrument input, you need an audio track. Does that make sense? Other than that, if you're using MIDI, it'll be either a MIDI track or an instrument track. For this instance, it will be creating one mono audio track. Step three, hit create. Here's our track. So step three is hit create. Step four, we need to do two things to this track before we can ever record. Part one of it is we need to name the track. Why do we need to name the track before we record?
So we don't lose it.
Exactly. So essentially the file will actually be named, the clip will be named based upon this, what we put up there, okay? So in our next step, your next step is to name the track. Now, for today's setup, I'll actually have you name the track VO for voiceover, but if it was something else, like let's say it was just, you wanted to record somebody saying, hey, you can literally just call it hey. If it was a lead vocal, a lot of times you would call it Vox, or Vox 1, or Vox verse, or Vox chorus, based on what part of the song you're going to use. For today, you're going to call it VO, but you need to label the track. To label the tracks, now in this step, you've done labeling tracks, so I'm not going to itemize how to label your track, but I'll show it to you one more time. You double-click the nameplate, and you just type it in, and you can hit return, okay? So you're going to name the track. In your next step, we need to assign the input. In order to assign the input, so your next step is assign the input. All right, and in this instance, you can make it anything you want, but it's based upon what kind of interface configuration you have. So you're going to assign the input. In order to do this, your next step will be to hit Command equals, or Command plus, switch over to the mix window. So you need to, in your next step, hit Command plus to switch to the mix window. And in your final step here, you are going to make sure the I of the I/O, this first in the I/O, is assigned to mic 1. So your final step in this part of the preparation is assigned to mic 1. Now we're going to do 2 more phases of this, and then we'll switch to drills. Okay. In the next 2 phases, basically what needs to happen is you need to set the microphone up to be ready for recording, and then you will need to actually test it so that it's ready to optimally record. From there, your final step is to actually record. In today's instance, the first thing what we're going to do and how we're going to do this is you won't actually be required to record anything in particular on this first set. After we do our first set of drills, we'll go back and I'll tell you exactly what I want you to record the second time. Does that make sense? So the first thing we're going to want to do is in your notes, you might want to just mention or head this up. It's still part of recording in Pro Tools, but I would put in there setting up microphone. Just as a subheading, setting up microphone. Because in this next phase, you actually have to do something outside of the box, something physical on the device. Now, real quick, if you can do me a favor, take a peek, and I'm going to break out a flashlight for mine. Let's take a look at your interface real quick, okay? So if you lean over, the red box, that's your audio interface. Let's take a look at that. There's a couple components that I want to point out, and then I'm going to tell you which specific ones you need to select. First of all, you should see that there are 4 jacks off to the left. Those are both mic and instrument inputs. So they'll actually take both XLR and 1/4 inch. The one a lot of times you're going to use primarily will be, of course, input 1. So that first one's going to be very important for you. So step 1 for setting up your microphone is to plug one end of your XLR into mic input 1. It's real basic, but... So in that step 1, it was to plug one end of your XLR into mic input 1. Step 2 is to plug the other end of your XLR into the microphone. Again, that sounds really simplistic, but you'd be surprised. Some of you are new to this anyway, so this is great information. Step 2 is to plug one into your microphone. Step 3, you'll notice there's a series of switches. And the way that it works out is you see your first 3 jacks, and then from the left, moving left to right. If you start on the left and you see your first 4 jacks, and then you see your very first knob. There's a couple of switches above that knob that are very important. One of them shows a guitar, which of course, by showing me the picture of a guitar, tells me that this interface is very prosumer-based and not necessarily professional all the way, because professionals don't need pictures. They use either symbols or just short lingo. It really should say instrument, but that's what the guitar is supposed to emphasize, is that essentially that the jack that you connect to can be switched to become an instrument. And the big thing here is we need to make sure in our next step, okay, step 3, ensure that the following switch sequence is selected or unselected. The light needs to be off for the guitar, that guitar symbol. So light off for the guitar symbol. That means it's not switched to input or instrument. If it's switched to instrument, it uses the 1/4 inch input. If it's not switched to instrument, it's looking for a line input or an XLR level input, and it'll auto detect that. So make sure it's deselected. So the guitar needs to be deselected. The next thing you see, switch number 2, the roll-off symbol, you can just write it there. We call it a roll-off, but what it is it's a high-pass filter. For those of you who've already done any of the audio courses, that's a high-pass filter. That roll-off is typically set to 80 hertz. The point of that roll-off is so that if I have any undue low end from holding this or rumbling, it'll filter it out on the input. Does that make sense? So the roll-off switch, in most cases, when you record dialogue, should be selected. Even when you record vocals, a lot of times a roll-off will be selected, unless you have someone who has a really, really low voice that you want to use. You know, if you're doing a James Earl Jones voiceover, you might not want to roll it off because you might want to roll it off at something like 60 or 50 in the post. So do select, okay? So select the roll-off switch, which is switch number 2. And then you see this last switch, okay? Well, there's one more switch, there's a pad, but the last switch in the top row, it says plus 48 volts. This is phantom power. Phantom power is an additional amount of power that has to be supplied to condenser microphones. Because today you're going to be using dynamic microphones, it is not required, but if you were using a standard studio condenser, that 48 volts would be required. For today's setup, please make sure plus 48 is not selected. It's deselected. It's not pushed in. So far you would only have one button lit up, all right? And then also make sure that the pad button that you see, most of the time that pad could be anywhere between a -10 to a -24 dB pad. The pad is designed to give you more headroom. Like let's say you have a really loud source, the pad switch will actually turn the input down anywhere, like I said, anywhere between 10 dBs and 24 dBs, depending on what the preset is, so that you have more room to actually control the volume if something's super loud. A lot of times if something's really loud, the input's really hot, a lot of times it's because it's a line input, it'll force you to go all the way down to 0, and then you can't turn it down anymore if it's still too hot. So if you apply the pad, it gives you more range room down on the lower end to be able to reduce the volume before it comes in, because if it comes in too hot, it distorts before it ever hits the computer. Does that make sense? So make sure pad button is deselected. Okay, we won't need it unless you're so loud that you're clipping on the device, and then you realize that right away. But if the pad was selected, your input would be really quiet. Today's setup is going to be fairly quiet. You guys won't be putting out very hot levels. Now, in addition to this, on this particular device, in your next step, I would make this your next step. So that whole series should have been one step. In your next step, we need to configure some things on the device itself. So if you move over to the right-hand side of your device, you should see something that says mix balance. And in the mix balance should be set all the way hard right to DAW. You see that? Everybody find the mix balance? It's like all the way to the right. It's not the farthest right knob. It's the second one back to the left. It's just above it. It says mix balance. And then on the bottom it says in, and then on the left and on the right it says DAW. So that should be rolled all the way right. What this is it's a cheat. Latency is a term that you're going to hear a lot in digital audio workstations. Latency is the delay that comes from you actually talking into an interface or an instrument playing into an interface and it going to the RAM system and then being delivered from the RAM to the long-term memory on the hard drive and then being recycled back to you and converted back to your ears either through speakers or headphones. Because there's a timing mechanism that actually takes place, it takes time to convert that information. A lot of times there's latency on the line. If there's too much going on in the session, what a latency will do is it'll make everything feel like it's delayed. And it really screws up timing because as a musician, when you hear your performance be delayed, your first initial reaction is to speed up. Well, because latency exists, there's a couple ways we can deter latency inside the system, but on cheaper interfaces, the cheat that they use for it is they give you a direct input mix. And that's what that knob does, is if I was talking into this directly, if the computer had a lot of latency in order for it to convert to the computer and come back through the headphones, what you could do is mix that knob more towards where it says in, and what it'll do is from the electronic side, it'll literally split from the microphone and go right directly to the output without ever going to the computer. So the in represents a mix of me just directly using this device. You would be able to hear this if this was standalone and I took the computer out. I'd be able to hear that input directly from me to that headphone output. So again, the point of that is to bypass the computer to give you a more like zero latency representation. The problem with it is that high-end expensive interfaces have zero latency or next to zero latency. Low-end interfaces will promote zero latency, but they don't actually have zero latency. What they have instead is a mix knob for you to fake zero latency. You'd prefer to have actual zero or near zero latency through the system. Because the goal is to always, the reason I have you switch to the DAW side is because your goal ultimately is to always audition or monitor what you're recording, not directly, but after it goes into the system. Because you wouldn't know if there are pops or clicks or digital problems or artifacts in it unless you heard it monitored through the conversion process. Does that make sense? So you actually want to hear it goes in the computer. Now, there is going to be a step that we need to set up in order to ensure the lowest minimum latency in the system. So we're going to do that in the next phase as soon as we get off the hardware. The last thing you need to do is make sure that the switch, there's a switch right by the mix balance. It needs to be deselected, the one that says out 1 through 8. Now everything else on your device is already configured. So the last thing we'll do when we come back around, we won't do it now, is you'll actually need to make sure that your headphone volume is turned up, and you'll need to actually make sure that your gain knob is turned up for channel 1. But we're not ready for it yet. What we have to do first is we're going to go back to the software, and in the software, after you've configured your input, so maybe you want to put back like a little note in Pro Tools, you're back in Pro Tools again. So back in Pro Tools, your next step is to go to Options and choose Low Latency Monitoring. And hopefully the configuration allows for it here. Yeah, okay, good. So in the Options menu, you're going to choose at the bottom of the list, it says Low Latency Monitoring. This is an additional low latency option for the system, which is awesome, and it allows us to have low latency. In your next step, you're going to go to Setup, Playback Engine. You've done the Setup Playback Engine before. It's familiar to you because this is how you start your system. You do system startup. So you're going to go to Setup, Playback Engine. And in the Playback Engine, what you need to do for your next step is you're going to lower the hardware buffer size to 256 samples. For today, you should be able to get away with 256. When you have a lot of tracks, a lot of times you have to settle for 512. If you're on an HD system, you can get away with 256 or lower. Today, you're going to hit 256. There's another thing here as well. See this thing that says ignore errors during playback/record. May cause clicks and pops. Now, let's talk about that just for a moment. We're going to pause here. If we want ultimate, pristine audio recordings, we have to deselect this. What will happen is if the converting, the system processing has conversion errors, which happens on systems that don't have enough processing power, the recording will dead stop. So you're in there recording, you have a drummer recording, you have an orchestra recording. If it hits a maximum amount of processing power for the computer system, it'll dead stop. Obviously, the problem to that is oh crap, we have to restart the recording, and whatever they were doing, they have to restart. That's the downside. The plus side is it also means that you won't have any conversion artifacts. If there were going to be conversion artifacts, the system stops before they happen. If you're not, like when I record for me, when I'm recording demos and I'm just stacking up a bunch of tracks, I will use the ignore errors because they're just demos. They're not going for release. I'm not super worried about the sonic, capabilities. As soon as I'm recording something that's real and I'm in a real session, that has to be deselected. Does that make sense? What it will do, of course, though, is it will force you to have to clean up the session, something you haven't learned to do yet, but to optimize the session as you move on and you record. And so that's something I will teach you in this class once you get stacked up in having like 24 tracks, 38 tracks, 96 tracks. It really becomes burdensome. What we're going to have today is I'm going to have you go ahead and leave this on, but notice that if you hear any pops or clicks during your process that are not from the microphone but are actually from conversion, and you'll notice them a lot of times, they literally are clicks on the track. You just have to re-record. You're going to have to re-record that segment. Does that make sense? But again, we're not super worried about it today. But if you were, if you're working on something that's going to be released or you're working on something that's going to be for a client, that has to be disengaged. Okay? So we reset our buffer size to 256. At this point in time, we're going to check the microphone. And you might want to just put a subheading, checking the microphone. This part's super easy. What you're going to do is you're going to record arm the track. And to record arm the track, so in your first step, record arm the track. And essentially, it's selecting the record enable button. So we're arming the track. And what we have to do, like let's say we have 20 tracks in our session. Anytime we do a recording pass, we have to isolate which tracks are actually recording at any given moment. A lot of times we're not going to record them all at the same time. So we have to isolate which one is actively in the recording process. So we have to arm the actual track. So we're going to record arm the track. In the next step, you will test the mic. So you can literally go to the mic and go check, 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 check. And what you're going to do is while you're talking into the mic, you're going to look at your levels here.
your goal typically is to make sure that there's enough headroom that for your particular voice and dynamic range, you don't clip, which clipping will happen at 0. And you're going to, in this next step, so you might write into this next step, speak into mic, adjust mic gain 1 on the interface. And your goal, of course, is to turn it up enough so that it's getting pretty hot. But notice what happens as soon as it gets too hot, it will clip. The other thing is, very interesting process, part of the process. Check, 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 1, 2. So you're gonna check the mic, speaking to the mic, turn up mic gain 1. Okay, so speaking to the mic, turn up mic gain 1. Pretty simple, right? You'll see the meters here. If you get a clip, if by chance you clip at all, what you can do is you can clear the clips by just clicking it. All right, and then, because what it's set to do a clip hold, what they call a clip hold is if it ever clips, it'll stay that way, so it shows you, hey, something clipped at some time at all. Here's the issue. Notice I still have a lot of headroom here, right? You see how much headroom's there? Hey, 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 hey. The issue is, anytime you have an interface, you actually, there's a couple, and then I can say in the whole chain, you have a couple places you can clip. You can actually clip the mic, and then as you go into any device, you can clip whatever that device is, and as you get into your interface, your preamp stage, you can clip that device. And then, of course, you can clip in Pro Tools. The problem with it is that if you clip at any one of these stages before you ever get to Pro Tools, it'll sound like it clips. Does that make sense? It'll saturate the sound. It won't sound awesome. So one of the issues that we have here is when you're talking and you're setting your mic level, you have to do it based upon what you see, and you have to look under the counter, and you have to make sure that you see your green lights stay green. If you clip it all on the input, those green lights will switch to red. Does that make sense? So I would just say in your next step, check your headroom on Pro Tools, check your headroom on the interface, okay? And headroom is that amount of space between your loudest overall volumes and clipping. So basically you're just making sure there's a little bit of room to give you some space. And you can just talk, like normal. The other thing we want to do in doing this process, one final step here before we go to recording. Switch to Options. Down at the bottom, switch to Options, Pre-Fader Metering. Now, by default, your meter comes up, or your fader comes up at nominal, at 0, which means there are no adjustments. What happens in fader metering, pre-fader versus post-fader metering, if you switch it to pre-fader metering, so your step is to go to Options, switch to pre-fader metering. That means that Pro Tools will only show you the volumes of what's coming in without any adjustment of the fader. If I do this, so watch what happens. If I am not in pre-fader metering, the reason why there is pre-fader metering versus post. Pre-fader metering is for recording. Post-fader metering is for mixing. Okay? Because once the source is in, then it's very important to know what's happening with the overall levels of the channels after you turn them up and down. So we're going to go to pre-fader metering, but I want to show you what happens if I'm not in pre-fader metering. So if I'm not in pre-fader metering, I'm in post-fader metering, which means if I turn this down, if I could do this left-handedly, check, 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 1, 2, 1, 2, check, 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 1, 2, 1, 2. Actually, it won't show it now because I'm not in the. That's funny. Let's see if it. Oh, there you go. Check, 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 1, 2. Well, that might only show me in my input mode. Check, 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 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, 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 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, 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 1, 2. In pre-fader meter, in post-fader metering, essentially any adjustments on the meter will actually show in the device. In addition, any plugins that are applied to the track that are live will actually show metering post-plugin versus pre. The importance of that is you don't want to, you want to ensure, if I'm clipping because the volume coming into the box versus I'm clipping because anything that's applied to the plugin or anything that's applied to the meter volume. Does that make sense? So you're going to switch to pre-fader metering. After this, and you won't need input mode for what we're doing, but after this, you literally will go to the step called record. The easiest one of them all. Now, there's a bunch of record modes and there's a bunch of record options. If we have time to get to them today, we will. Otherwise, we will be at them next week. Your command that's used to begin recording is command plus spacebar. Now, if you remember, pushing spacebar once makes it play. Pushing spacebar the second time while it's playing makes it stop. If you command spacebar, oh geez, except I'm going to have to go one more route for you guys. Let me see here. I don't know why they didn't deactivate this. When you use command spacebar, it's your hotkey to quickly start recording. There is one workaround that I think you guys are going to have to use for me because darn. Let me see. Hopefully. Okay, good. One workaround on the presets that we're going to have to toggle off today. So this, make a side note, you're going to have to do this today once. I remember last time we had to set a preference, we had to do it once. Today you're going to have to do this one step once. But on your own system, you're going to have to know how to do this. Anybody use a Mac? All right, for Mac users specifically, when you load Pro Tools for the first time, it'll give you a warning and it'll say, hey, just so you know, you have to deactivate the shortcut for Spotlight in order to use the command for recording because it's the same command. And Spotlight is a system on the Apple OS that allows you to do this quick search for items. So we have to deactivate the keyboard shortcut. That final step that I gave you was the end of the recording process, but what you'll need to do in order to get there is add this one more step, deactivating Spotlight. You're going to have to do it on all of your systems. If mine's on, that means yours are likely on. So deactivating Spotlight, again, you only have to do this once. So when you do this at home or on your own Mac, you only do it once and you'll never have to do it again. Unless you update. That's the only, if you got an update for, what's the newest thing now? We're out of El Capitan, aren't we? Oh, Sierra, yeah. So if you update to Sierra, as soon as you do your update, Spotlight gets turned back on, okay? So very important to know. So to deactivate Spotlight, you're going to go to the Apple and choose System Preferences. So you just go to the Apple in the top left corner, choose System Preferences. So you're going to go to the Apple, choose System Preferences. This window comes up here. Please choose Spotlight in your next step. It's up at the top row off to the right, so choose Spotlight in your next step. And then in your next step, choose Keyboard Shortcuts at the bottom left of the window. Technically, here's what I'm going to have you write these steps down, and I'll just have you guys do this now before you kick off your recording process. Once you're in the shortcuts, your final step is to deactivate or unclick the Show Spotlight Search and the Show Finder Search window, because you notice the hotkey is Command Spacebar here, and then this Command Shift Spacebar, which we'll also need. So you're going to deactivate those two options. At that point, you can just close the window, you're done. Okay? Let's go ahead and have you guys do this all together as a group real fast. Especially after you write that down. So you're just going to deactivate Show Spotlight Search and Show Finder Search window. There are also a bunch of hotkeys in here that you may want to activate, but I can talk to you about that later. So what you're going to do is go ahead and do this with me real quick. Those steps, you're going to go to Apple, System Preferences. It'll kick you to this window. So if you go to the Apple System Preferences, please select Spotlights in the top row, far right. Once you're in Spotlight, please select Keyboard Shortcuts on the bottom left. So you're going to select Spotlight, Keyboard Shortcuts on the bottom left. And then in your Keyboard Shortcuts, please just deactivate Show Spotlight Search and Show Finder Search window. As long as those are deactivated, your hotkey will work. Everybody good? All right, you can close that window. You're done with it. All right, let's go ahead and drill from the beginning. We'll do our drills the way we used to, because we missed it last Monday because it was so long. We're going to do them the way we traditionally do. While you guys are drilling, I'm going to come through and pass out microphones and XLR cables. So by the time you get to that portion in your drill, you're ready to move on to the setting up the microphone. Is that cool? Awesome. Raise your hand and ask me any questions that you may have. This will be a little more lengthy, but not as bad as Monday. Mics. Everybody sign in. Oh. Miles and Hanif, did you guys sign in?
No.
Yeah, Dylan, if you could just pass that up to those guys when you're done. I don't know why this would wrap like this and roll through forward. This would broken if it is. You know, it's system. Let me know how to switch that. I got one on my station. Check. 1, 2, check. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, check. Check test 1, 2. Yes, sir.
All I'm hearing is like clicks, like click.
Okay, let me. Actually, there's something in the configuration that might need to change. So sit tight for 1 second. I think we might have to reroute the output. Line path. Check, check, test, test. Check, check. 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 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 1, 2. Yeah, let me just figure out there's an output configuration problem. Let me just figure out what your routing should be because I haven't used the FCAs for their digital output, so I have to reconfigure something real quick and let me get you that fix. But as long as you have, everybody so far has monitoring on screen, right? Monitoring on screen. Yeah, so for right now, you should be able to at least, if you want to monitor just on your mix knob on the interface, just roll it back to about 50%. Or really, you could just roll it hard left instead of hard right, where it's in instead of DAW for now, because we're not getting that fold back. Didn't work?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if that's why it was tied up the way that was. Should be able to get that to work. If it's just a cheap cable. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Check test 1, 2. Yeah, you know, we'll probably I'm gonna have to see what the workaround is for that. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna move on to the next phase real quick. If you guys could redo your configuration one more time and attempt to do it from as much from memory as you can. So start from scratch, pull your volumes, pull your mic, do it one more time, and then we'll move on to the actual recording phase because I want you guys to do some recording and some editing today. All right, everybody's there so far, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to write, and this is the part that might end up getting a little stalled. In the next set of sequence, I'm going to basically show you, I'm going to write a script, I'm going to have you guys read it. You basically will do this voiceover dialogue into the microphone. Once you're done, I'll teach you how to edit it. Now, when we do the stuff with voiceovers, the goal is to get a clean take. It isn't necessarily to get the clean take read fast necessarily or read accurately all the way from end to end. So I'm going to put some statements on the whiteboard. I'll have you guys read them. It's pretty simple. What you're going to do is after you do this, you're going to do several takes and we'll combine them and I'll teach you how to shuffle edit using takes in order to make an overall final product. Okay, does that make sense? So what we're going to do, the first step you need to know is how to make new playlists. So in your notes, write in how to make new playlists. To make new playlists, all you have to do, and playlists are what we call takes in the recording world, but it's for you guys in Pro Tools, it's called new playlists. What you're going to do is you're going to select this little menu item over here right by the nameplate in the edit window. It's this little arrow right here, and you're going to hit new. Once you hit new, it'll give you some sort of dialogue. It'll say, well, what do you want to title this? For the most part, you could just leave it as it's titled, or you could call it take one, take two. But in the Pro Tools file directory system, if it's a period .0 something, that's considered a take. So if it's period dot 01, it's take essentially the second take. Period dot 02, it's take 3. And it's one extra take because the first one wasn't on a period dot 0 anything. You could literally label these if you wanted to as you go. So you could call it VO take 1, or this one would be take 2. And then, do another round. So record another round, check 1, 2. Again, you're going to read the same script the second time, maybe with a little more enthusiasm or a little bit of adjustment. Once you're done, you'll push stop, and you'll do another new. And you'll just hit take 3. So in your notes, you're going to go to the menu and hit new. What I'd like for you to do is make 5 takes. At the end of 5 takes, so let's say, actually, let me do a couple more takes just so you can see it. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2. And actually, maybe this might be a good time to actually build the script. Okay, so you'll read the following script. Welcome to MUS 239. I'm your host, whatever your name is. Today we are recording exciting voiceovers. Period. Okay, nice and simple. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to do this in a series of 5 takes. When you're done with your 5 takes, you're going to do something we call comping the takes. So in your notes, after your 5 takes, your next heading will be comping takes. And comping takes is very common, and it's something we do all the time in the studio. We do multiple takes, we comp the take. After we comp the take, then we can make adjustments. What I'm going to have you guys do is I'm going to have you comp the take, and then I'm going to have you shuffle edit it for time. But I'll talk about that in 2 seconds. So let's take a look at comping takes. Okay, so let's say I do. Welcome to MUS 239. I'm your host, Vince Casas. Today we're recording exciting voiceovers, period. And then we move on to the next take, and we do the same thing. Now, if they're not fluid, let's say the take goes like this. Welcome to MUS 24, and you screw up. Don't stop the recording. Okay, for voiceover land, it's different from music. When someone, and it is, I'll just say this, the momentum of performers in the studio is based upon their psychology and what they feel, think, and are motivated by in the studio. So it's a deterrent for someone to flub a word and to stop it. Same way as a deterrent, this happens all the time for new engineers. The musician's back there, they miss a beat, or a rhythm, it's a deterrent for you to just go to dead stop it. A lot of times what you will do, good musicians, if they really wanted you to stop, they'll stop. Most times what you'll do is you'll let them play through, and in most cases, they'll either remedy the situation, or if they just continue to get worse and worse and worse, it'll be very clear that they should stop, and then you can wave them off. But in most cases, if it's just a simple one line, flub, especially for voiceovers, they just pick up where they messed up. So if I said, welcome to MUS 239, even if they were like, and I've worked with a lot of voiceover artists before, if they're like, I didn't like how I said that. Welcome to MUS 239. Welcome to MUS 239. When they're happy, they'll move on. I'm your host, Vince Casas, right? And then they'll jump into the next line. Today we're recording exciting voiceovers. Today we're recording exciting voiceovers. Now what happens is when all that is said and done, the editor, the engineer, is responsible for doing the comp. Comps are done in a series of methods, but for the most case, your next step to comping these edits is to switch the playback or the track view selector to playlist. So on your next step, switch playback selector, or I'm sorry, track view selector, switch track view selector to playlist. Once you switch it to playlist, you see all of your takes. You'll see all of your takes itemized down below. Now, in order to do this correctly, your next step is to make one more new playlist, and you'll call this one comp. Okay? One more new, you'll still call it VO, but it'll be VO comp. What you should see is it'll end up with a blank at the very top where the track is. It'll end up with a blank palette there, and you'll see your listings down below. Now, for today, until I need to figure out the I/O situation to sort this out. So what you're going to have to do for today is you're going to monitor. You'll monitor through the use of using the mix knob on the input, and you'll edit by switching your interface playback engine back to a built-in output. I mean, I'll have to figure out what the routing situation is because I can't clearly see what the problem may be, but what you'll need to do is go to Setup, and of course make sure you save, because this will just close your session and reopen it. You'll go to Setup, Playback Engine, and if you switch back to built-in output, it'll force close your session and it'll kick you back around. It'll say, hey, these things can't be lined up, which is fine. And then at that point in time, I don't know if there's, let's see. Sorry, let me make sure there's some volume on this. You guys will switch over to having your headphones connected directly to the back. You'll have to disconnect your headphones, plug them into the back of the unit. Does that make sense? So you just switch. You'll switch that playback engine to built-in output, and you'll move your headphones back to the computer itself. We need the interface to record the mic, but we don't need the interface to edit the audio that's already in the system. Does that make sense? So when you're editing your comps, I don't know if I thought they had this lined in. Well, they don't. Actually, I'll have to. Let me turn this up here. You'll only be able to hear it locally, but. Are motivated by in the studio. So it's a deterrent to, okay, after your comp track has been created, your next step will be to monitor and listen or preview your tracks by hitting the solo button. The solo button is this little S right here. Now what happens is you're going to solo these. So let's say we solo this one. Check 1 2 1 2. Hey 1 2. And actually, maybe this might be a good time to actually build jazz or a little bit of adjustment. Oh, we did. This one was the last one, or the second to last one. Welcome to MUS 239. So you'll solo it. In your next step, once you find a piece of the audio that you like, highlight it and hit the up arrow. So let's say I like this one. I'm like, I like the way this started all the way up till Welcome to MUS 239. Right before it says MUS. Welcome to MUS 2. Welcome to MUS 2. Welcome to MUS 2. Welcome to MUS 2. Welcome to. And then hit the up arrow. Notice what it does. It's going to throw it into the main timeline. Now, one of the issues we're going to have here is I want to find
MUS 239.
MUS 239 on one of these other tracks. I'm going to have to go look for it. In this instance, I did it way down here somewhere.
I'll just say this. The momentum of performers in the studio.
Sorry, I gabbed a good bit before we got there.
Let's see. Welcome to MUS 239. When they're happy, they'll move. MUS 239. MUS 239.
Again, when you like
MUS
it, you'll push up. Now, obviously, these don't sync, so we're going to have to do something to make that happen. Once you've kind of put them in position, you need them slammed together. We're going to use shuffle mode to do it. So with your next step, switch to shuffle mode, and you're going to line up these takes so that they match together by sliding them over. So switch to shuffle mode. That's pretty easy. Switch to shuffle mode. Select the grabber tool will be your next step, and all you're going to do is grab and drag to the left. And then when you grab it, you'll drag it to the left and let it go. It'll automatically snap to the leftmost. So watch what happens. So switch to shuffle mode and then grab the clip and drag it to the left. Notice it highlights right behind. Before it wasn't there. Now all of a sudden, if I move it, it's going to go right there into that position. Does that make sense? Now, after you shuffle it, switch back to slip mode. Okay, so your next step is to switch back to slip mode and make sure that it's positioned effectively. Okay, so you might not want to do this word by word. You may do it phrase by phrase, but you're going to want to probably piece a couple of these together just so you get the hang of it. And then you're going to switch to slip mode and just nudge these until you're very happy with them. So like, obviously you can see there's a bunch of dead space here. I didn't cut out all this space right here. So a couple things we can do to do that. You can use either the trim tool or the selector tool or the grabber tool. If we want to, let's say I want to trim this out so that this is a real easy cheat, all right? I want to see where the line previously would have landed, or the line that falls right after this would have landed in my natural spot. See it right there? So what I can do is if I highlight it and then I go and click the selector tool and I use the tab to transients function. Remember we did this on Monday, but it didn't work very effectively on our audio. So I'm going to switch the tab to transients function. If I hit tab, that'll show me where the beginning of that phrase should be. And if I hit the separate command, you guys remember the separate command, Command E? I can very easily just get rid of it. And if I go into the new file and I hit tab and I hit separate and I delete this, what I then can do is go back to shuffle mode. Sorry, no, the reason this isn't just an easy step-by-step is because it depends on what you are doing will determine whether or not this is something that will get done in this fashion or it will be done in a different way. Sorry. Hold on, something's up. Something's up with shuffle. I think there might be a clip. Leave some audio there. If your shuffle ever doesn't work, just make sure you highlight the dead zone and delete just in case there was a piece of a clip in there that you didn't see. And then essentially the goal is by doing that, it dropped me to the position where the audio should have been underneath. Does that make sense? The only catch to this is if we zoom in real close at that spot, we're going to want to put a crossfade here. The issue with putting a crossfade here is the crossfade will take a little bit of time to blend out of one take into the next. So if you do a crossfade too big, it will actually play underneath the original that started here, just a touch. So you want it to be nice and tight. So your crossfade is going to be pretty small. So you're going to highlight, do right in your next step. To heal your regions, I don't want you to batch fade them. Remember how we batch faded them and we just did triple click Command F? I want you to itemize each transition with a crossfade. In order to do it, use the selector tool, highlight a little bit of space, and hit Command F. Okay, so use the selector tool, highlight that transition. You have to get part of the clip on the left and part of the clip on the right. So you have to highlight a little bit above, hit Command F, and it'll heal it. You know, and then when you're done piecing these together, you can audition how this went. In addition to this, there's one more step that'll need to be done, but I want you guys to get this far.
Welcome to MUS 239.
Now, a couple things we can do to this. Notice you see a gain. See this gain, 0 dB, and this one over here.
Welcome to MUS 239.
Notice there's a difference in the overall volume. So you know, when you're done with the edits, you can clean these up
Welcome to MUS 239.
by adjusting these.
Welcome to MUS 239.
Now, we're also going to use a compressor, not today, but we would, when we do voiceovers, we would use a compressor that would give us a little more sustainability. But it's very easy to adjust these clips directly so that they're a little more like each other.
Welcome to MUS 239.
Now, when you're done, you can just hit save. Now, remember that these items do not, the ones that are down below, do not play unless you solo them. If you're pushing play, the only thing you'll ever hear is the comp track. All right, so these ones are inactive until you solo them. So don't forget, if you soloed them, to unsolo them so you can hear your comp track once you start throwing them up. Does that make sense? So you're going to throw them up, shuffle them left. Throw them up, shuffle them left, so they're nice and tight. When we're done, and you guys are done, I'll say, okay, I want this whole take to be 10 seconds long. And then the battle for shuffling really begins. And there's a way to do that in the voiceover takes. Let's go and have you guys go through this process. Your script is there. First off, start by doing 5 takes. After you do those 5 takes, switch your track view selector to playlists. And then you're going to go ahead and begin comping. Raise your hands with questions, okay? Yes?
I'm not getting any sound.
Oh, no? Did you get any input signal? Record on the track real quick. Yeah, just a little report I got. Check the mic, or just pick it up and check it real quick. Check. Oh, something wrong with the chat. It's like floating back there. Check. Yeah, it's like it might if it messes up, it'll pull it out and try to put it back in. You're just having the same issue? Oh, you're good. Okay. Anybody else have a mic issue with the input?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Honey, you okay with it?
Yeah. Wait, so are we leaving the headphones?
Yes, for the recording process, leave the headphones in here and switch it back to roll it back to the input mode, which is the GNW on the knob that says mix.
Right, yeah, so not the music.
Yeah, exactly. So you can use your headphones to monitor directly from the interface for your recording.
Okay.
Once you're mixed or comping, once you guys are done comping, ready to go to comping, switch the playback engine to internal.
Yeah, it's I recorded with the I just listened to it with the input or the with playback engine. So I record with it on the
Yes. And then just switch over, yeah.
because when I was recording on this I was only hearing clicks.
Yeah, it's okay. That's thank you for telling me. Apparently, we're having a foldback issue. So, on your mix knob, switch it from roll it from GAW back to input, and then you'll be able to monitor yourself.
Test.
Welcome to MUS 239. I'm your host, Nick White. Take your recording. Silent voice